Recently, I'm starting up a brand new Greenfield project, and I would like to try out Bootstrap 4 as the kind of like the laid out library. So let's set up Bootstrap 4 within the new project. The first thing that I need to do is to start running the application to make sure that the application is running fine with a plain, like very simple HTML file. Let's start that. So we run npm run. That command is actually specified within the package.json file. It's right here. And it starts the light server that is configured from the last episode. So let's run it. If you take a look at the HTML, there are basically one paragraph and one div, two block elements. One is the first paragraph in the index.html, and another one is a div for the end of the body. So let's install the Bootstrap 4 code. From the Bootstrap 4 website, they suggest two different ways of installing Bootstrap 4. One is using package managers, whether it's npm or bower. I guess we got to forget about the germ here because look at the version, it's kind of older than the beta. It's an alpha version. So later on, we'll be using the npm to install the Bootstrap library. I choose not to use Bower because Bower is kind of phasing out. It's an older way of loading in client-side library. And the second way of loading in the Bootstrap library is through the CDN. So there are 4 different files that we need to load in. One is the CSS file that does the styling with there should be no dynamic behaviors, and 3 different JavaScript libraries which provides the dynamic behavior. If you go through the documentation from Bootstrap 4, you will see the quick start, which loads in those 4 files, 3 JavaScript file and 1 CSS file. If you scroll down a little bit, you will see that they have a starter template, which we should be using. Within the starter template, there is the head part, which consists of the character set, the viewport, as well as the CSS. And in the body, there are HTML text and 3 JavaScript libraries. I think it's easier if we could copy the whole file. Let's go back to the editor, paste the file. Okay, how about we take these 2 lines and put it inside the body. Let's remove the hello world line. Let's grab the title and put it at the very first line right here. And then I think we are almost ready. Let's remove our old code. Let's save this. We have already put in all the CSS and the JavaScript libraries that is required for the Bootstrap. Well, let's take a look at what happens if we take out the styling. We should see a different style in terms of font as well as the spacing that is in here. Let's comment out the line for the CSS. When you save it, it changes. So that means we are loading the CSS properly. So let's put the CSS back to the code. Take a look at the browser. I'm going to save the editor right now. Let's save it. See the font changes as well as the spacing changes. So CSS is definitely working. Now, in order to find out whether we are loading the JavaScript library properly, we need to go into the debug log from the browser. So let's go to the debug log. Let's take a look at the network. Let's check out the JavaScript only. Let's reload. Let's expand it and see it's kind of too small. So we see from the debug log that we have loaded in jQuery as the very first JavaScript library, and then the popper min.js as second, and then the Bootstrap as the third. And the other ones are more like the browser saying from the like server. So we are loading these 3 files properly. So let's go back to our page. Now let's take a look at the sequence of the library that is being loaded, as well as the sequence of the JavaScript that is listed in the HTML. Note that the jQuery is loaded the first one as it is the first one in the list, and then Popper is the second one, and that's why it is loaded second, and Bootstrap is the third one, and that's why it is being loaded at the third place. This is the recommended sequence that is from the Bootstrap website. What happens if we change the order of the JavaScript library? Say, for example, let's change the order such that we load Bootstrap library first and then the rest of the libraries. Let's turn on the console as well because we may see some error if the Bootstrap library depends on the other two libraries. So I'm deleting that line, the Bootstrap line, and then move it to the very first line when we load the JavaScript library. Let's save it. Okay, note that there's an uncaught error. Bootstrap JavaScript library requires jQuery, and jQuery must be included before Bootstrap's JavaScript. That means the Bootstrap library depends on the jQuery library. Alright, so let's move the jQuery library above Bootstrap and save it again. Oops, there's another uncaught error. The Bootstrap dropdown, that means the Bootstrap library, the JavaScript library, requires popper.js. Take the popper and move that back on top of the Bootstrap library. Save it. So this actually proves that the order of the JavaScript library that is listed in the HTML is important, as there are libraries such as Bootstrap library depends on the jQuery library as well as the Popper library. So let's try it out if we can change the order, like swap the order of the jQuery library and the Popper library. No problem. There's no complaint. I guess the Popper library does not depend on the jQuery library. But anyways, let's put it back into the proper order that is recommended by the Bootstrap library. Remember just now when we moved the Bootstrap library on top of the Popper? That changes the order of loading the library, and we see there's an error because Bootstrap dropdown. Notice that the Bootstrap dropdown requires popper.js. So in order to verify whether Bootstrap all these JavaScript library has been loaded properly and see it in action, let's use this Bootstrap dropdown component to prove that the JavaScript is working. So in Bootstrap documentation, let's go to the components. Look for dropdown. Let's scroll down and see. Okay, that's the drop-down link. And there's a drop-down button, and the respective code is right here. Let's copy that, paste it in between these two lines. Notice that it won't work right now because we don't have the proper order in terms of the Bootstrap library has to be loaded after the Popper library. But let's save it and see what happened. Okay, after we saved it, we see that the button show, but the complaint is still there. Let's see whether you can actually see anything come out. So when we click on that, nothing happens. But the supposed behavior is if you click on the drop-down button, it should show a drop-down with some entries that is listed out like action and another action, something else here. Okay, so in our app, it doesn't work. Now let's go back and change the order back to the recommended order from the Bootstrap library. Let's save it. No complaints, that's good. Let's click on this. So you see, it's working because we see action and another action and something else. So that actually proves that the Popper is working. So how do we know whether jQuery is working within our application? Well, the fact that we are using the data toggle, which is a Bootstrap attribute that calls jQuery to toggle the button, that already proves that jQuery is working for our application.